mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington.
Hello, Master Gidhu Yuot. It's Thursday, November 17th. This is Africa 54.
East Africa community troops arrive in Goma to help DRC forces hold back surging M23 rebels. While genetically modified crops are designed to create higher yields, GMO opponents say they hurt small Kenyan farmers. Senegal's World Cup hopes include having Sadio Mane on the pitch, but his knee injury makes that uncertain. All this and much more on today's Africa 54.
Soldiers who are part of the East Africa Community Regional Force have arrived in the Democratic Republic of Congo amid fresh clashes between the DRC army and M23 rebels that forced hundreds of people to flee. Trevor Corral reports.
Members of the Kenyan Defense Forces arrived at Democratic Republic of Congo's Goma airport on Wednesday as fighting between the army and M23 rebels forced hundreds to flee. The soldiers are part of the East Africa Community Regional Force. Their commander, Jeff Nyaga, said the primary focus is still on diplomacy.
And those who fails or refuses to voluntarily disarm, then we'll go for them.
M23 have staged a major offensive this year, seizing territory and sparking a diplomatic row between DRC and Rwanda. At least 188,000 have been displaced in North Kivu since October 20th, according to the UN. The rebel group has moved closer to Goma, a key city in the province. The governor there said on Tuesday that rumors of a rebel presence in the city are spread by the enemy in order to create panic.
That was Trevor Corral of Reuters reporting. Dozens of environmental activists demonstrated inside the venue hosting UN climate talks in Egypt Wednesday. Medical workers from various countries performed what they called a die-in to raise awareness about the health impacts of climate change. A doctor who participated in the protest says the use of fossil fuels has been linked to many illnesses, including respiratory and cardiovascular diseases.
We're seeing governments and we're seeing different decision makers in these halls over the last 1 week and in the coming days. And we don't think people understand the kind of emergency this is. We are here from our hospitals because we do, and we care about our patients. And we feel that same level of care and concern for our patients is not visible in the halls of this conference. So our key demand is to address the climate crisis as a health crisis and eliminate out all the fossil fuels from around the world. No politics, no questions asked. That is the only thing that can save our patients.
Beyond leaders and negotiators, the summit includes scientists, academics, journalists, and representatives from a myriad of companies ranging from those developing low-carbon projects to traditional oil and gas firms. Let's turn now to the UN Climate Conference ongoing in Egypt for the latest news and notes. I'm joined live via Skype by VOA's Middle East correspondent Heather Murdoch from Sharm el-Sheikh. Heather, we understand the delegates may have been inching closer to deciding what the final draft may look like. Give us some highlights.
They did release a draft today, a 20-page document they called a non-paper that might give us a preview of what their final draft of an agreement would be. One thing that is in it is they did reaffirm the goal to keep the world below or to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. This is a goal to reduce carbon emissions that the world is not on track to meet, but it is important if we want to continue basically life as we know it with our coral reefs and our glaciers and the level of climate disasters we have now will increase, but in a more manageable level if we keep it to that. The one thing that was not in this agreement was a comprehensive deal to provide funding for developing countries that need money for climate disasters. They are generally on the front line of climate problems and the least emitter. And the world has come together at this conference to say this is unjust, needs to change. The richer countries need to pay for the poorer countries who are paying in blood and gold and their lives for this climate crisis. However, this draft simply just calls for trillions of dollars more to fund this. It doesn't say where the money is coming from.
Moments ago, Antonio Guterres has also addressed the summit. Can you give us some highlights on his remarks?
Yes, he returned to Sharm el-Sheikh today from the G20 conference, and he urged all the parties to come together for an agreement. He said that there has been a breakdown in trust between the North and the South, as he said, developed economies and emerging economies. And he said right now the time is to act and to stop blaming each other, also to stop discussing, negotiating. There's very little time left in this conference. And as he puts it, there's very little time left on this earth to make decisions when we still can prevent the worst climate disasters from happening. So that was his call to leaders for the next 24 hours of this conference.
Heather, we mentioned some protesters there. We saw a doctor speaking. What did you witness today from climate activists?
Yes, there have been climate activists here from the beginning, and as the conference winds down, yesterday and today we heard from climate activists from all across Africa and also from indigenous communities in South America. They were already talking about being disappointed by the conference. They feel like a lot of the promises that were made, this was supposed to be Africa's COP, this was supposed to be a time when we were going to start negotiating how to fix problems that have been in the making. And so far, the problems have been brought to the table, but real solutions haven't been found. There was one indigenous chief from the Amazon who says he feels like he's been tricked, and he feels like all of the efforts that have been made at this conference have maybe done more damage than good.
We also had some remarks from Egyptian president and foreign minister talking about some three kind of key things that must bring the world together on climate impact. What do you know?
Well, that is one thing that has happened at this conference as we wind.
Heather, we've lost audio there, but Heather Maddock there reporting live for us from Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Vanessa Nakate is one of the most famous climate activists in the world, and she is not afraid to make her voice heard. Nakate says climate change is about people. VOA Straight Talk Africa host Heidi Adams spoke with Nakate in New York to talk about her activism and why she advocates for what she calls forgotten communities.
Vanessa, what drew you to the world of activism? And then what made you take on the climate crisis?
Yeah, my very first involvement was really in 2018. That's when I started to carry out research about the challenges that the people in my country, Uganda, were facing. And at that point, I found out that climate change was one of those challenges. We do study about climate change in school. Most of the students have, read about it in geography class, but it doesn't carry like the reality of what is happening. So you study it, you do the exams, and you go to the next class. So I didn't really understand the impact of climate change while in school. But in my research, I got to see the impacts, and I got to understand the landslides that were happening, in areas like Bududa, Bundibujo, the flooding, the droughts that were impacting very many people in Uganda. That is what really triggered me to start asking questions and doing more research about what causes climate change and why is it that people are suffering right now. And in that, I decided I had to do something about it. And being inspired by Greta Thunberg from Sweden, I started to strike for the climate.
I've read that you've said that you don't want to be the go-to African voice on this issue, on climate change. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I have had experiences where I am called the voice of the African continent when it comes to climate activism, and that is not something that I want to be called, because I think it's very problematic in a way, because it erases the voices of other activists that are doing incredible work. I'm not the first activist on the African continent or even the first activist in Uganda. There have been people that have been organizing and mobilizing for years, and I just happened to also join this, movement that was already there of different organizers. So when I am, called a representative or something like that, it erases the work of other activists. And the experiences that I see in Uganda, for example, with the landslides and the floods, may not be the experiences that another activist sees in their country. And I may carry a statistic of what is happening in Kenya or in South Africa, but I may not carry the experience. And that's why there is a need for those stories in those communities to tell, to have their own platforms, to be amplified, and for people to know that the climate movement is more than one face or two faces. It's a whole global movement with millions of activists that are organizing and mobilizing and transforming their communities. And this is something that I say so many times: every activist has a story to tell, and every story has a solution to give, and every solution has a life to change.
That was VOA's Heidi Adams speaking with climate activist Vanessa Nakate. As drought continues to ravage East African countries, people living in cities are turning to urban farming. VOA's Paul Ndiho explains.
The worst drought in 40 years has hit farmers across East Africa, causing food insecurity and threatening famine. In Kenya, arable land on the outskirts of Nairobi is supposed to be incredibly fertile. Using genetically modified crops is seen as a solution to failing harvests. Kenya's National Biosafety Authority is testing one variety of maize that is being genetically modified to resist drought.
We conducted confined field trials for a maize variety that is enhanced to resist drought. Now, what that means is that this maize is able to give at least a harvest even in times of high water stress, when there is no rain. So, and also it has the ability to more or less resurrect. I mean, it goes dry, completely loses water up to around almost 20% or even less. But when a drop of water hits the ground, the plant is able to come alive.
Food security, consumer rights, and biodiversity groups are not happy with genetically modified organisms. They say it will also create unfair conditions for Kenyan farmers, 80% of whom are farming on a small scale. At an organic farm outside of Nairobi, Esther Kigai says she has made a healthy profit despite the drought. Using low-tech irrigation techniques and indigenous seeds, her vegetables are flourishing.
I think what we are lacking in our country is water. Look at the people who have enough water with good seeds, not GMO seeds. They are doing well. They are not hungry.
Mujira insists that consumers and farmers do not need to worry about genetically modified seeds.
We take it through international standard tests. Number one, we first of all conduct what is called substantial equivalent. What that means is that we take the GM maize and the non-GM maize, do a profile of the chemical composition of the GM, profile of the non-GM, then we put them together and say, are they substantial? Of course, they can't be 100% the same, but are they substantially equivalent?
Many African countries have bans on genetically modified agriculture amid concerns about potentially harmful effects on small farms. But supporters of GMOs say that revolutionary techniques are the only way to feed an ever-growing global population.
Kama GMO itaboresha
If GMO is going to improve our produce as intended, as a farmer, I support it because we want a good harvest and a good time.
The Horn of Africa is facing its worst drought in 60 years, which is affecting food production in many parts of the region. As a result, food prices in cities are continuing to skyrocket, leaving people with limited options. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Authorities say a multi-story building under construction collapsed on a neighboring home on the outskirts of Nairobi, killing 2 people Thursday. 3 other people have been rescued alive from the home that was next to the collapsed building located in the Ruaka suburb. The early morning collapse is the second such incident this week. On Tuesday, a multi-story building collapsed in the city and construction workers were trapped inside.
Mom and Dad were inside the house when the building started collapsing, then collapsed on them. So when the ambulance came to rescue them, they found them already dead and the construction was not fully completed.
This is becoming a menace in Kiambu, by the way. This is not the first story or other instance. In the course of this 1 week, we have had 2 buildings that have collapsed. We have lost innocent lives. Last month, we had a woman and her children that were buried innocent. They were also the same case. They were not in the building, but a building near their house collapsed, and the mother and the children just died like that. So we're asking, this is the work of the county government. It's not even the national government. The approvals, the drawings and everything is the work of the county government.
Building collapses are common in Nairobi, where housing is in high demand, and unscrupulous developers often bypass regulations. Still to come, we'll have a report on a FIFA World Cup legacy initiative. Stay with us.
As extreme weather and natural disasters are prevailing in Africa, we ask, how many of the promises from last year's United Nations Climate Conference, also known as COP26, were delivered in 2022? On this week's edition of Our Voices, we will compare the outcome from this year's COP to last year and examine how global north can further assist African nations in achieving climate justice, and most importantly, what role African women will play in the process. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, gunmen have killed at least 12 people in an attack on a village in the northern Nigerian state of Plateau. It's the latest deadly incident fueled by growing pressure on land resources in the country. South Africa's parliament says it will discuss in December the findings of a special panel tasked with establishing whether President Cyril Ramaphosa should face impeachment for allegedly covering up a crime. And Republicans have finally seized control of the U.S. House of Representatives from Democrats, narrowly securing a legislative base to oppose President Joe Biden's agenda for the final 2 years of his term and leaving power in Congress split. Generation Amazing Foundation is a FIFA World Cup legacy initiative established by Qatar as the social impact arm of the World Cup. Using the power of sports for social change, the foundation aims to tackle issues such as gender equality within football, youth development, and health. The foundation has reached 1 million beneficiaries worldwide since its inception, including in Rwanda and Uganda. For more insight, VOA's Linomudu spoke with Nasser Al-Khoury, Executive Director of the Generation Amazing Foundation.
We initially started Generation Amazing in 2010 at the very early stages of the bid for the World Cup because we had a different vision for legacy. We didn't want to host a mega sporting event and not to have a legacy, or to fall into other traps of some countries that think about legacy post-event. We focus on the human and kind of the social legacy component. We use sports for youth development. We embed different life skills. We promote UN Sustainable Development Goals. We create inclusive and cohesive societies through our programs and interventions.
Tell us about how football can be used effectively as a pathway for development.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, we transitioned to deliver all our Football for Development coach education units online. That's accessible by any community coach anywhere in the world with an internet connection. We're very excited to be launching our first Generation Amazing Community Club this year in Africa. It's our first project in Africa. It's in Rwanda. It's an hour away from Kigali, but it's in partnership with the Ministry of Sports and the National Rehabilitation Center that sits under the government of Rwanda. But basically, it's an orphanage. There's a lot of young boys that have different issues. They live under bridges in the streets, and so the government basically puts them through rehab. And we've complemented that program with a football for development or sports for development, let's say, aspects. So we've built a football pitch, we've built a volleyball pitch, and a basketball court as well. And then obviously we have a train-the-trainer model. We're training, a group of trainers from Kigali to be able to go to the community club and be able to deliver sessions where they can talk about gender equality, social cohesion, different issues around race, around peace. We believe that football is a platform, and whether it's used to play sports, which is amazing, and we do that. But we can also do more than just kick a ball. We empower the coaches and we train them how to deal with difficult situations and conversations. At Generation Amazing, we conduct a very thorough needs analysis to understand the specific needs and the complex issues of the community. We then, based on that, design the interventions and the programs that will tackle those social issues.
So how would you assess the implementation of the program since it was first launched? Overall, do you feel like a lot has been done in terms of your initial goals?
We're very close to hitting our target, and this target is only the beginning for me, because I just feel like everything we're going to do is going to be after World Cup. We are a foundation that will go beyond the World Cup. We are the legacy of the World Cup. Now we're looking at expanding the units to involve other partners that we work with. We've designed a hybrid curriculum. It's called Youth as Agents of Behavioral Change. So how youths themselves and their community can be agents of change. There's a training that we created around this where we worked in Iraq, Uganda, Myanmar, and Argentina with the national societies, the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. Again, sports is great, but let's not also forget about the other side of sports, the culture, skills, the things that you can embed and promote through the match itself.
So if you were to kind of summarize some of the takeaways with regards to Generation Amazing, what would you say are perhaps the takeaway, the message, or looking forward?
Creating a more peaceful world through football, I would say is kind of the dream. And I think it's not impossible. We need a lot of partners, and we need support from the FIFA legends and people like David Beckham, who's one of our ambassadors, and from football clubs, but we also need support from teachers and schools and parents and students. So it's a whole ecosystem, I think.
That was VOA's Linomudu speaking with Nasser Al-Khoury, Executive Director of the Generation Amazing Foundation. Senegalese national team star Sadio Mane is not likely to be ready for the start of the World Cup. The best-case scenario has the Teranga Lions player missing the first matches, while the worst-case scenario would be him being the competition We get more on this story from Sedina Abagay in Dakar. Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori narrates.
Top scorer in the history of the national selection and second in the 2022 Golden Ball, Sadio Mane is at the zenith of his career. Considered the soul of the Senegal national team, the Bambali native is involved in more than 50% of the national team's goals when he plays. His possible absence from the World Cup leaves the national coach bitter.
Losing Sadio Mane is not something easy for a coach, for the team, and I would even say for African football. Today, we don't want to think about it, but inevitably we have to think about it in case Sadio Mane is absent. But for the moment, we still have time ahead of us. I don't want to talk about the absence of Sadio Mane, even if in the back of my head, I'm trying to prepare for it.
What is Senegal worth without Sadio Mane? For former Lions and members of the National Football Technical Department, the answer is simple. To see what the team is worth without Sadio, the other players must assert themselves.
Sadio, c'est vrai, c'est une valeur.
Sadio, it is true, it's an international value. But if he doesn't play, he can't play. The others will do the job. Maybe if he was there, it would be a plus. But that does not mean that because he's absent, that Senegal can't achieve results. If that is it, it's not worth it. It's not a team.
Oui, c'est un joueur très important.
Yes, he's an attacking player. But as the coach said in his press conference, he's a group. And I think that at the attacking level, we have quality attackers. And so I trust them, whether it's Boulaye or Iliman or all the others, to make up for the absence.
There is talent and quality, certainly, but also a lot of fickleness in the attack of the Lions. This is the opinion of some observers for whom Sadio Mane was the pillar of the offense. So without him, the team's performance hangs in the balance.
Je vois pas la ligne d'attaque aujourd'hui.
I do not see the line of attack capable of carrying this team, insofar as Ismail Assar, as well as Boulaye Dia and Famara Diédhiou are not consistent in their performances. I also give the example of Bamba Dieng, who plays little with Olympique de Marseille. So if Sadio does not participate in this World Cup, it will be very difficult for Senegal to go beyond even the round of 16.
Top scorer in the history of the Lions of Teranga with 34 goals, Sadio Mane has also been involved in 12 of Senegal's last 25 goals in the Africa Cup of Nations and the World Cup. His injury and possible withdrawal from the team, which is looking increasingly likely, would be a huge blow to many who have rested in him all the hopes of Senegal in the Qatar World Cup.
That was VOA's Vincent Makori narrating for reporter Sedina Abagay. Be sure to join us for more sports. We have our reporters in Qatar and Ghana. We'll be bringing you live reports from those two countries. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.